Advanced SSRS. In our previous nugget, we created a very basic SSRS report. It was a tabular report. I showed you how to create the data source, but now we're going to take this a step further. We're going to look at some advanced features, such as using SQL Server analysis services as your data source. In other words, if you've already created a cube somewhere, then you can use that cube as the data source. We'll also look at a report called a matrix report, which is a little bit different from a tabular report in that you have columns and rows instead of just rows. We'll implement some conditional formatting as well. One common task that we provide is color banding between the different rows. Another thing we can do is highlight certain fields if the numeric value reaches a certain point. Then I'll show you how to create a parent-child relationship. In other words, we'll have two reports, and when you click on a cell in one of the reports, it then takes you to the child report, and you can even set parameters. And then the last thing we'll take a look at are charts. You can embed a chart inside of your report, and we have lots of different styles of charts to choose from. I'll give you an example of both a simple pie chart as well as a multiple series bar chart. Let's get started with SSAS as a data source. In our previous nugget, we tapped directly into a database to obtain our information. In this example, I want to show you how we can tap into SQL Server analysis services to grab the information and then display it in a matrix format. Okay, so what we're going to do first of all is actually open up a project. We're going to open up an analysis services project. Choose any one that you want. Okay, so here in my example, I have my cube, which involves a fact table. We have here sales amount, and we also have order date, product, information, and so on. You'll see here we have the English product name as well as the product line name. Okay, so when we look at this information in our cube, I just want to show you what this can look like. So here we have our measures, our sales amount, drag that onto there, and we can look at the order date, maybe look at the calendar year. Okay, you can either drag that on there or just drag it directly from here. It doesn't really matter in this case. And then let me collapse this. We're going to go to our product, and here's our English product name. And you can see that there's various information here, and it looks great. So we're just verifying that we actually have data in our analysis services. Okay, so let's go ahead and close this. We'll close our project. And let's go ahead and create a new project. This will just be a report server project, and we'll call this Cube SSRS project. Okay, so you'll see here we have shared data sources and we have reports. Let's create a shared data source. So you just need to right click on here and say add new data source, and we'll call this Cube DS. And instead of saying SQL Server for the type, we're going to say Analysis Services. We need to have some kind of connection string here. I'm going to click on Edit. My server name, I can give the server name itself, or I can just say localhost since it's on the same server there. Then we specify our Analysis Services project, which is right there. And we can test our connection by clicking on this button. Okay, so that looks great. Then we hit OK. The other important thing is the credentials. You want to make sure that we use Windows authentication. Then we hit OK. So you'll see that we now have this shared data source. Let's create a report that uses that data source. So we'll right click on reports. We'll say add new report. Here's our data source. We hit next, and then we go through this wizard for our query builder, and we're just going to drag information on here. It's going to look different than our analysis services. We won't have rows and columns quite yet, but we will once we create our matrix. Okay, so here's our measures. Let's drag on our sales amount. And then if you expand your product right here, we're interested in the product line name, as well as the English product name. And then let's look at the order date as well. Okay, let's grab, you can either grab the calendar year from here or you can grab this calendar year. And you'll see here that we've got some repeating values here, and it's not really in a matrix format yet, but we will fix that in just a moment. Let's hit OK. Okay, now hit Next. This is where we have the choice between tabular and matrix. Let's choose matrix. So we'll have rows and columns, and here's our details, and we can even organize things by pages. Let's hit Next. So now, for the page, if we have product lines at the top of every page, for example, accessories, mountain, road, and so on, it will be nicely organized. As far as the columns, let's go ahead and put the calendar year for the columns. And then let's have the English product name be on the rows. So we'll have all the different product names right there. And then our sales amount is the detail. Then we can hit Next. And here's our different looks and feels here. We'll just stick with Slate, hit Next. And our report, we'll call this Products by Year. And let's click on Preview Report and hit Finish. So you'll see here that we have our years. So for accessories, we only had sales in 2003 and 2004. If we go to the next page, here we have mountain. Looks like we had sales in all 4 years. Same thing with road. And then for touring, only sales in 2003 and 2004. So when we scroll down, you can see all this information. Now you'll see this little rectangular area up here. There's no text in there, but we can add a little heading in there if we want to. So we can go into Design, and we can double click on there, and we might say, for example, Product/Year. And now we go ahead and preview it, and it looks a little bit better. Let's format these numbers to include dollar signs. Go back into Design, click on there. We'll move this over a little bit. And we're looking for formatting here. So the format, we can say $0.00. Now when we preview this, it looks a little bit better. You can also add totals for not only the years, but also the products. Okay, so the way we do that is go into Design and make sure that you right-click this particular field right here. Just right-click on it, go down to Add Total. Okay, so if you say Add Total Row, it gives the total down here by the year. If you right-click on this field one more time and say Add Total Column, you'll see that you get a total right here by the products. Okay, so let's preview this again. And I'm just going to scroll to the right here. You'll see here that we have total. And so we can change the captions if we want to. Also, let's scroll down so you can see that there's a total here. Okay, so we can go in here into the design. By the way, I'm going to change this heading up here to make it look a little bit nicer. And I'm going to make this say total for year. And I'm going to go here and say product total. Now let's preview this. Okay, looks pretty nice. Now, what if we want to have alternating banding as far as background color? I mean, that's a really common thing that we do with reports. In other words, if we want every row to be white and then silver, we can do that. So let's go into design mode, and the first thing we want to do is give your groups more meaningful names or easier to remember names. So you'll see for the row groups here, if you double click on there, we have matrix 1 English product name. It might be a little bit easier to remember if we just say product underscore name. Same thing with your calendar year. So now just make sure that you have this box here highlighted and go into Properties, and we're going to look at the background color. Right now it's set to no color. Let's go ahead and hit this and then hit Expression, and I'll drag this over here so you can see it. So you'll see that by default it says transparent. Let's get rid of that. We're going to use a built-in function called IIF, and you'll see that it gives us some little hints here. It takes 3 arguments. The first argument is a Boolean expression, and then if that expression evaluates to true, then the second argument is returned. If this expression evaluates as false, then it's going to return the third argument. So these second and third arguments here have to be color names because we are setting the background color. So what I'm going to do is utilize the built-in row number function. And here the row number, we're dealing specifically with the group called calendar year. So if we use the mod function, modulus takes a number, divides it by another number, and gives us a remainder. So it's looking at the row number. Let's say we're on row number 5. 5 modulus 2 is going to give us a remainder of 1, which evaluates to true. In other words, if you're dealing with even rows, then it's going to evaluate to false. If you're dealing with odd numbered rows, it will evaluate to true. Okay, so that's our first expression there, and then we can choose whichever colors we want to. So for example, this is light steel blue, and then maybe have white as the other option there. Okay, so close that off, and now we can hit OK. Now we can preview this. Okay, do you see that we have banding going on? Looks pretty nice. So if you scroll over a little bit, you'll notice that we don't have banding for this product total, and the reason why is we didn't put that expression for that particular cell. You can go in there and change that on your own if you want. You can either make it a hard-coded color or you can put in your own expression. I'm not particularly happy yet with what my numbers look like. You'll see that I'm missing commas. I do have the decimal places where I want them, but it's not exactly formatted, and I'm even missing dollar signs here on the product total. So what we can do is go into design mode, and you can double click on the cell that you're interested in, and then just go to number, make sure you say currency, and here you say use the thousands separator. You can specify how many decimal places. By default it's 2. And then you can say show 0 as, and you can put in your own number, and then hit OK. Let's do this for the 2 totals as well. So double click on those. Number, currency. Almost finished there. And now go down to here. And now we can do a nice little preview. Okay, that looks a little bit better. Another neat little thing we can do as far as the background color is to conditionally highlight a cell if the value meets a certain condition. For example, under product total for all of these different products, we can say, you know what, highlight it yellow if the total is over $20,000. So you'll see that we do have several cells here which meet that criteria. So let's go ahead and configure that. We go into design mode, make sure that you have this cell right here highlighted, and under background color, we're going to create an expression. So instead of saying transparent, we're going to once again use our IIF function and put a Boolean expression in here. So the common function that we're using here is the aggregate sum. So if the sum of, here, let's go into our fields, the sales amount, see how it's grabbing the sales amount value, if that is greater than 20,000, then we will highlight it with yellow. So let's look at our constants, double click there, and then if it is under 20,000, then we'll just say transparent. Now let's test this out. We'll click our preview, and there we have some values that are over 20,000. The next thing we can do here is create a parent-child relationship between two different reports. In other words, here we have our parent report, which gives us information as to what was purchased in what year, and then we have the totals. Well, what if we want to allow the user to then click on the product total and then see more detailed information, such as the order date, who did the purchase, what their email address is, as well as their phone number? Well, we can do that pretty easily. Let's also make an assumption here that the data that we need to get in our child report is not accessible by this data source over here. So in this case, we're going to have to create yet another data source. It's okay if we make it shared. So I'm just going to right-click, and I'll say Add New Data Source, and I'll call this Product Sales Details. And this will be SQL Server, and let's create our string here. So the server name, in my case it's Julie1, but it's probably something else in your case. And here's our database name, AdventureWorks DW 2008. We can test our connection, looks great, hit OK, and then OK again. Okay, so now that this is a shared data source, we can then right-click under Reports, and we can add a new item. We'll just say Report down there, and we'll call this Product Sales Details. So you'll see that the look and feel here has changed a little bit when we toggle back and forth between these two different reports. Here's our original report. We have the data source as well as the data set. When we go to this new report, it's no longer there. We actually have to create it. So let's go to New Data Set, and the data set, we can just call this Product Details. And for the data source, it's not on there, so we need to click on New, and we'll call this Product Details Dataset. And instead of using embedded connection, we'll just use a shared data source reference, which we just created a second ago. Hit OK. And then we need to decide what information we're extracting. Now we can initially decide this information, and later if we want to go back and add more stuff, we can. I'm going to click on Query Designer, and I'll just right-click here, and we're going to add a table. I'm going to grab the Fact Internet Sales, and I'll just grab all the columns. Now you'll see here that the product key is in here, but it doesn't have any detailed information as to what the English name is for the product. So we can right-click here, add a table. Let's add dim product. Let's do the same thing for the customer, because there is a customer key, and we want to include their first and last name, which is in the dim customer dimension table. So we'll just hit Add on there, and then Close. We can go back here into Query Designer and select more things that we want to make available. For example, here's my English product name, and for the customer, I want to grab their first name, maybe their last name, email address, and phone number. We can also put an order by clause in here. I want this to be ordered by the order date key and then by the name. So here we'll say order by Fact Internet Sales.order date key, and then by the dim customer last name, as well as dim customer first name. Get rid of that trailing comma. And our query's good. Let's go ahead and hit OK. Now, if we were to just preview this, it would be a very long report because there's a lot of information. Remember, we're trying to drill this information down to just that specific product key. So let's add a parameter. So remember, the way to modify your query is to go into your data set. So here it is right here. Just double click on it. You can always modify it through here. You can use the Query Designer, or you can modify it verbatim. So remember earlier when we said select Fact Internet Sales.star, this automatically got expanded to all these different fields. That's why you're seeing all of that. So what we need to do here is add a where clause. So here we're going to say where Fact Internet Sales.product key equals and do an @ sign and whatever we want to call our parameter. I'll just call mine prod key. I hit OK, and look what happens in parameters. We automatically have this prod key right there, and we'll hit OK. And now we can preview this. Okay, so you'll see how we're prompted. I just happen to know off the top of my head that there is a product key of 214, but this is just a debugging step. I'll show you how to link from one report to another in just a moment. So we'll just hit View Report. Our report's getting generated. Now you'll see that nothing is showing up here. That's okay. We defined our data set, but we didn't drag and drop things to our report. If you go to design mode, you'll see that there's nothing on the report. Okay, so what we can do is simply drag things over there. Now, if you're not seeing your toolbox down here, I want you to go to View and then Toolbox, and then you should see it. So when you bring your toolbox over here, let's drag Table over here, and then from there, click back to Report Data. And here are all the different fields that you can choose from. So you can just drag and drop things. For example, I'm interested in the order date key, as well as the last name and the first name, maybe the email address and phone number. Whoops, we can delete that. There we go. And the phone right there. We can now preview this. Let's plug in number 214 once again. To make it a little more informative, we can add a text box to our report to display what product we're talking about. So make sure you go back into design mode, and let's go to our toolbox, and we're going to grab a text box onto here. You can make it as large as you want, and I'm just going to right click on mine and say expression. So it's in here that we can grab our data set, scroll down until you see the English product name right there, and then hit OK. And in fact, if you want to put some hard-coded text, for example, sales for, and then on the next line have the product name, you can do that. So now when we preview this, it looks a lot nicer. Okay, here's sales for the Sport 100 helmet red. Now the question is, how do we get our parent report to link to this particular report? Well, it's actually pretty easy. Let's go to our parent report. So just double click on there. And what we'd like the behavior to be is when we click on the product total right there, it links to the child report. So we need to find the cell in design mode that corresponds to this guy right here. Let's move over a little right there. Make sure that this cell right here is selected. In the Properties window, scroll all the way up to Action. And for the hyperlink options, make sure you say Go to Report. Then you have your report choice in the drop-down list. So this is Product, Sales, Details that it's going to. And then you set your parameters. So you're going to add to the parameter the product key, and then we're looking for the product key right here. Okay, so that product key is actually coming from the cell. Hit OK. Now let's test this. Okay, let's hone in on the AWC logo cap. Click on there. You'll see that it is a link. So I click on there, and here are the sales. If you want to go back to the parent report, just hit that link right there. We can test this for some other things. Let's go to half finger gloves small. It's looking perfect. Now, as far as formatting everything, you'd have to go in there manually and format the cells like you want. The reason why you have to manually format it is because you didn't choose one of the looks and feels that come pre-built out of the box. I'm going to fine-tune my child report just a little bit to make it look nicer. What I'd like to do, let's just double-click on this guy right here. What I'd like to do is combine the first and last name into one field. The way we do that is through the data set. Okay, so make sure you click on the report data right there and just right-click on that and say Add Calculated Field. And we'll just call this full name. And for the expression, we'll go into our fields. We'll find the last name. We're going to concatenate to that a comma and a space, and then add to that the first name. Then when we're in here, we can actually click on this guy right here, and instead of displaying the last name, let's display the full name. Let's change this heading to just say customer. And we don't need this column anymore because customer already includes the first name. Let's see what this looks like. We'll go ahead and put that in there. Okay, good. So far, so good. It's displaying the customer. I'm going to make these columns a little bit wider. And the other thing I'm going to do is eliminate these duplicates. You'll see here how we have the order date key and we have a couple duplicates here. Let's change that up. So we go back to design mode, and you'll see that under the row groups that everything is under one row group. We want to change that. If we right click on that row group and we say let's add a parent group, and that parent is going to be the order date key. So here is our group. Let's call this order date. And we can now get rid of this original order date key. And you'll see that it is now eliminating any duplicates. Okay, so here we have 2003, July 1st, and so on. Go back into design mode, make these a little wider as I mentioned. To make your date look a little nicer, you could also do a calculated field for that order date. It's completely up to you. A common task that we do is to incorporate graphical charts into our reports. So I'm going to do that right now. What we're going to do is focus on this first report right here. And here's the preview of it. And what I'd like to do is create a pie chart divided into the years. So we have a graphical representation of how much was sold each year. So the way we do that is we go into design mode, and we want to have a cell where we can place our chart. So to make it look nice, I'm just going to right click right here, and I'm going to insert row outside the group right above, so right there. And then I go to my toolbox, here's my chart, and I drag it over here. I have lots of choices as to what type of chart we're dealing with. I'm going to do just a standard pie chart, and then hit OK. So the other thing that makes this a little helpful is to drag that so you can see it a little bit better. There's several different parts of this chart. Here's the chart title right here. And in fact, you can just call this sales by year if you want to. Then we have this legend right here, and then we have the pie chart itself. At this point, we can start dragging things on here. Notice that we have drop data fields here, and we have drop category fields here, and then we have a third option, drop series fields. So if you're measuring several things, you would drag those series right over there. In this example, we're going to make this very simple. We're going to drop the data field, which is the sales amount. So let's go to our report tab right here, and our sales amount is right here. Drag it right there. As far as the category, let's categorize this by calendar year. So drag it right there. Now we can preview it. Okay, so this is for accessories. For accessories, this is the piece of the pie for 2003, and this is 2004. If we go on to our next page, here we have the mountain category, and it looks like 2004 and 2003 took the biggest part out of the pie. Now, one of the things that we'd like to do is put information on this pie to specify what the percentage points are. Let's go ahead and add percentage points onto our chart. Go into design mode, and just make sure you right-click on the pie itself and say Show Data Labels. And you'll see here that all of these are now selected. Right-click on it, and then you can go to the Series Label Properties. For the label data, let's make sure it says pound%, so it will show it in percent format. And then for the font, you can set it to whatever font you want to in size. I'm going to make mine Arial 8 points, and then we hit OK. Let's preview it. That's looking pretty good. We go on to our next page, and so on. After you create your pie, you can decide to change the type. For example, if I'm back in design mode, I can always select the pie itself. You right-click on there and say Change Chart Type, and you can decide, you know what, I'm going to have a disconnected pie like that, where the pieces kind of look exploded. Now you can preview it again, and this looks a little bit easier to read. Next, we're going to create a bar chart with multiple series on there, so you can see how you can take several measurements for an attribute. So what we're going to do is actually right-click on reports. We're going to add a new report. And the data source, we're going to choose a data source, and here's our query. What we're doing is we're selecting the product line as well as the English product name. Here we have the product line name, which is just a case expression. So all we're doing here is taking the product line, looking at the value, and then giving a more descriptive name, whether it's mountain, accessories, road, touring, or something else. Okay, so then we're also grabbing the sales amount, the calendar year, and then here are our from tables. They're joined together, and we're going to order by the calendar year and the product line. So now we hit next. We're going to create a table. And we're not going to paginate anything, but for the group, we're going to have the product line name as well as the calendar year, and then the details are going to be the English product name and sales amount. We'll go ahead and hit next on here, next again, and we'll call this product line by year. It's just a variation of the report we had earlier. And so here's the basic information. Okay, so now what I'd like to do is insert a chart right up here. So we go into design mode, and I'm going to select right here, right click, we're going to insert a row above, and now we go to our toolbox and click chart, and this time we're going to drag this chart right up here. And notice that this bar chart here is vertical and that there are different colored bars there. This is a multiple series chart. Okay, so now if we drag this up a little bit, we can drag this over here. You'll see that we can drag and drop these. What I'd like to do is merge these different cells. So I can do that by highlighting all of these, right-clicking, and say Merge Cells. So now this looks a little bit better. Looks a little bit stretched, but of course I can pull that like that. Okay, so we're still in design mode. What I'd like to do is now define what's going to go onto our chart. So drop our series fields here. So in this case, our series is going to be the product line name. And then our category is going to be the calendar year. The actual value that we want to display on there is the sales amount. And then we can change the chart title to be something else. For example, product line by year. Now when we preview this, you'll see how we've got mountain, road, accessories, and touring color-coded, and then we have the years. What's nice about this is you can add as many series as you want to. You just drag and drop from the fields on the left-hand side. Of course, you can clean this up too. For example, we don't want this to say Axis Title. We want it to be more descriptive. We want this to say calendar year, and we want this to say sales. So we can go into Design, and then go down to your Axis Title right there, and you can double-click on it. Go like that, and this will be sales. Preview it again, and it looks really nice. Let's review what we learned in this nugget. I first showed you how to use SSAS as your data source. You need to first of all make sure that you actually have an SSAS project to choose from, and then you choose your data source. Then we created a matrix. There's a couple ways you can create that matrix. One is by using the wizard. The other is by creating a blank report and then dragging the matrix over from the toolbox. We applied conditional formatting to our reports. There's that built-in variable called row number, which gives us the current number of our row, and so we can use the modulus operator to determine which color is going to be the background. We also applied conditional formatting to cells to highlight cells with a certain value. Be sure to use the graphical wizard to drag and drop the different elements in that conditional formatting section. It's going to be a lot easier than hand coding it. Then we had parent-child reports. From your parent report, you're going to choose one of your cells and then go to the properties and set the action to be another report. And it's from that parent report that you can also set whatever parameters are defined within your child report. Then the last thing we talked about were our charts. We created a pie chart and also a multiple series bar chart. Make sure to drag and drop those charts from the toolbox onto a cell in your report. You're going to have to define the categories as well as the data that you're trying to display and possibly multiple series as well. Well, I hope this has been informative, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.